So tonight we have one of our favorite topics, which every one of our topics is our favorite. But tonight we are going to do being senior in your space, how to be senior in your space. So Yaila, would you like to start us off? Being senior in your space.
So what does it actually mean to be senior in your space, and why is that important? And for my journey in energy work, just from the beginning of learning about it myself, and now that I teach it to my students and my clients, I really get to watch the journey for people, and I've experienced the journey on my own. And being senior in your space for me is one, being really clear on your value system, completely being in integrity with yourself and kind of what you do and what you say in the world, and not really holding yourself back. I think in a previous video that we did, talked about feeling like I was boxed in my life, and I'm sure other people watching this might feel the same way if you kind of feel like you limit yourself from outside things. So for me, being senior in my space is really knowing and trusting my heart, my mind, my intentions, being very high in integrity in how I show up in the world with not just myself, but with other people and things that I'm doing. And really owning the thoughts that I think about, really controlling what energy I allow in and out of my space, and even the types of relationships I have. So my journey in learning how to be senior in my space was kind of tricky, because when you're going through energy work, you start to realize your values change, or you start to become aware of what your values are. And sometimes relationships change along that way. One of our previous videos, we talked about growth periods, and that's kind of when you hit a growth period, is when you're starting to become more senior in your space and really aligning to your value system. And some relationships changed in my life where there's people I absolutely adore and love, but we don't mesh anymore. We're not in alignment anymore. It's not that they're good or bad people or right or wrong. It's just our value system was totally different and it wasn't in alignment. And so as you change and you get more senior in your space, you're kind of brought through this very interesting journey of, I don't like to call it being put to the test of like really being senior in space, but you will feel like you're being tested sometimes, whether that's the true intention or not. It's just really learning how to trust your heart, trust your mind, trust the energy that you're seeing and feeling and sensing and experiencing and allowing or not allowing, and really staying in integrity of what your values and alignment is, I think for me is the biggest part of being senior. And of course there is energy tools you can learn to do that, various modalities, but I think really getting clear on your value system and staying in integrity with that is probably the best way I would describe being senior in my own space.
That's great, Yaila. That's wonderful. Okay, Peyton, what have you got to say about being senior in your space?
Yeah, I resonate with so much of what Yaila just said, because this, and with you, Corey, was starting this off, that this is one of the most important things. And so I always look at seniority as spiritual boundaries, learning to understand where you fit in the broader puzzle, because it's very easy when you start doing energy work or intuitive work or opening up your abilities to give your power away without realizing you're doing it. And so I think that understanding seniority is particularly important for anyone who's just starting to do this work, because you learn discernment, as we've talked about in a few of our videos, kind of over time and with practice. But it's very good, I think, especially for anyone who's just starting down this path, to understand what seniority is. Because I kind of see it play out in two ways with my clients, where it can be easy to give your power away without realizing it. And one way is when people start to do this work, a lot of students can be a little nervous about it. They can be a little afraid of what they hear of as being dark energies or dark beings, or they're afraid something's going to do something to them or something's going to get in their space. And so they bring some fear energy into the work. And so I think what seniority does, and why we teach our students and all of our clients, the importance of seniority is to know that you are always the boss of your space, and you are the boss of your energetic field. And no one else's energy belongs in your energy field, at least without your consent. And so that's something that can help, that it's important for beginners to understand, so that they don't unnecessarily get scared of this work, or that something's going to happen to them. And so it can help you understand that you're safe to do this work because you are always in control. If you run into an energy that you don't like the way it feels, or you don't trust it, whether it's energy or a person, you know that you can be the boss of that, and you can send away any energy that you don't choose to interact with. And that's what, for me, being senior in your space is knowing you are always in control in this work. But the second way I think that seniority kind of comes into play is when we start to work with higher dimensional beings. Because I see this with my clients when we start to work with the archangels, or we start to work with ascended masters, or even spirit guides, where it's so tempting as humans to think, oh, these beings are so much higher than me. I just want them to make all the decisions for me. I want them to tell me what to do. Archangel Michael, tell me what to do. And it's very easy to give your power away in that way, wanting someone else to make the decision for you. But that's also a question of seniority, that you are always making the decisions for yourself. And higher dimensional beings will tend to step back and pull back if humans try to kind of turn over the wheel to them. But that's a part of being senior in your space, is realizing no matter what you're working with, whether it's a person, whether it's spirit, that you're in charge and you're in control. And so to me, that gets to the heart of what seniority is about, is you are always the boss. You're in the body, the one in the body is the boss. So always know that you don't have to interact with anything, human or spirit, that doesn't feel good to you, that is out of alignment with you, that is not in integrity with you. And to me, that's what being senior is.
I loved what you ladies shared, and it's all so valid. When I was thinking about senior in being senior in your space, was, when I first started this journey, when somebody mentioned about being senior in your space, I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I need. And yeah, I did need it, because I came from a place of being a doormat, and not having boundaries. And as I was doing astrology, there's a placement in your chart, and of course I have the hardest placement, my Saturn, which is in Pisces, and it's all about boundaries, and either having boundaries that are too strong or not having any boundaries at all. And I didn't know how to have boundaries. I just didn't, I was a people pleaser. I have a servant's heart. And I would always get into situations, and I felt powerless. I really felt powerless. So what attracted me to being senior in my space was a sense of empowerment, where I was in a place of working on my boundaries anyways. Because there was, deep down inside, there was a place for me that I didn't trust myself. So getting the tools and becoming senior in my space was absolutely life-changing for me. This is one of the tools that was more life-changing than the rest of them. And because I finally was able to trust myself. And, the way that I teach my clients, and all of us do to some degree or another, is, you build up to that senior in your space. But what gets you to be senior in your space is by learning how to read energy. And then you realize that what you're reading and what you're feeling and what you're seeing or knowing is real. And that you start to build your self-confidence, going, okay, yeah, I really do see this. Oh yeah, I really do know this. And then you build up to your senior in your space. because you start to build up that self-confidence of what you see, what you know, what you feel. And that's one of the transformations that I love to see in my clients and my students, is when my clients and my students start to feel empowered with themselves, when they may have come from a place of powerlessness, which I know I did. And one of the other really important things, and gosh, not my poor clients, but I say this to my clients all the time, is, and my students, is that being senior in your space is very important, because, like Peyton was talking about, the fear of, getting captured by dark, entities and beings. And when you become senior in your space, that's why we all are, advocates for education. So that doesn't happen. Because energy is either ours or not ours. But there's what energy isn't ours. There's all types of energies out there. And I have had some students and clients that get really excited, because you do, when you start to be in your knowing and seeing, and you know what you see, and and you feel, they get really excited and say, oh, you know what, I want to go hook up to, Archangel Raphael, the angels, or Jesus, or whatever entity. And if you have not been taught to be senior in your space, there are entities out there that know that you aren't senior in your space. And energies out there, they don't know. You're like a bug light, you just have this light on, and they just like, oh, look, they come in. And if you don't know how to be senior in your space, like Peyton was saying, that you can tell them at any time, no, not here, not now, go away. You do take on energies that you don't want in your space, and by not being senior in your space, I have witnessed people having entities and beings in their space and not knowing that it's because they weren't senior in their space, and that they had a choice, like mediumship work or channeling, right? Peyton's the big channeler in our group. And the importance of being senior in your space, and that we talked about in other previous videos, about grounding out that energy and being able to call them in and tell them when it's time to leave. That's being senior in your space. And I loved what Yaila said about when you do get senior in your space, your values change, your self-confidence builds. And another big reason why the three of us are together is because one of the things that we all have in common, and that's very important to us, is integrity. And when you get senior in your space, you can choose that integrity, because there are a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of charlatans out there in today's world. But the importance of being senior in your space, owning your energy, choosing which energy you want in your space and what you don't, and by feeling empowered by being senior in your space and being able to draw those boundaries, builds that integrity. I wanted integrity. I thought I did have some, sort of integrity. Pride could have been masqueraded as pride, but I did have integrity. But it's such a different type of integrity when you can be senior in your space. It's, for me, I've warned a lot of clients and students now, don't jump ahead, because other entities in higher realms, there's some mischievous beings out there that like to play. And if you're not senior in your space, and get into trouble.
That's such a key point, Corey, with different energies out there, because when I look at the world, everybody kind of views energy in their own way. But when I see energy, everybody, whether you feel like you are intuitive or not, we're all picking up on different frequency vibrations, different thought forms out there. And that's why there's sometimes you can walk into a room or you can walk into a situation and you might get a sense of the vibe or feeling of what's been going on in the room. And, being senior in your space, you can actually impact that rough energy in a positive way just by owning your energy. You can either match the energy, you can take on the energy like it's yours, or you can stay senior in your space and start to welcome just the higher vibration. And so I love that you were saying that, Corey, with different energies, and even with you, Peyton, where some people, they like to work with ascended masters and archangels and healing masters. I work with them too. We all do here. And that's really great. But we also have a body. So that makes us, we're here in this physical realm with a physical body. So we actually have seniority of our physical space in this realm. Other guides and healing masters are there to come and help if we need on the energetic level, but we get to call the shots here for our own body in our own space. And since we have a body, we have automatic seniority for that. And so one of the ways I like to make sure I stay in seniority, I always say curiosity and amusement are my superpowers, because when you can go to the energy of amusement, because I've seen some gnarly energy, I've done healings for people and they tapped into like a funky frequency. And the energy, if you let it, I worked with somebody who was coming off of crystal meth, and crystal meth, if you've never seen that energy, it cracks your drugs, generally just kind of crack open your crown chakra, and energies can just kind of come and go. Same thing with alcohol. I mean, they call it spirits for a reason, because you're just wide open to all these different types of energies. And that, it's part of the world around us. There's people on different medications and drugs and alcohol. And when you don't know how to be senior in your space, or you don't think that you have that seniority, a lot of stuff can kind of come in and out. And so as a healer, as intuitive, when I'm able to stay in amusement and not match some of that gnarly energy, I'm able to help see the person through their healing, through their true, and I know Corey and Peyton are the same. It's like you're able to truly see the soul of the person and not the other stuff that's not their energy. So that was a great point that you two ladies made with seniority.
Yeah, and I love what Corey was saying, that most people don't realize that they even have this power. We don't even realize it as humans, that we have the authority to own our personal space. We're just not taught that. We're taught that everything powerful is outside of ourselves. Especially, I was raised in a very traditional religious upbringing, and everything was telling you what to do. You were not almost even in the picture, and so some of us have to actually be told, you are the boss of your space, just like you have to tell little kids, your body is you, that's your domain, and your energy field is exactly the same way, but we don't realize that. And so it can be easy to think that we don't have control of it. And then we get into fear mode and we think that things can happen to us. And if we're not holding our space, things can, which is why it's so important to, first of all, just know that this concept exists, but then also to have the training and the education to do this work safely. Because, the spirit world is just like the human world in a sense, where there are those that you don't want to invite over for dinner or have in your house. And in spirit, it's the same way. There are beings you do not want hanging out in your energy field, because they are happy to take over if you are not being senior, and so that's not at all to scare anyone, but instead to make you realize how truly powerful you are. You just have to claim your space, because there are ones who will claim it if you don't, if you're doing this work without the proper tools and foundation. So seniority is all about being like, no, I'm the boss of my space. And if I don't like your energy, whether you're a person or a being, you're going to need to step back. And even when we talk about working with ascended masters, standing in your space is saying, sorry, Jesus, you're going to have to take a few steps back. Your energy is too close to me right now. It's hurting me. And that's completely appropriate for us as owning our human bodies, to say, okay, this is not comfortable to me anymore. It needs to take a step back. And that's all about being senior in your space and confident that you are the boss of your body. and your energy field. So seniority is critical.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead, Yaila.
I was just going to say, even with that, because I know some people, when they are working with ascended masters and angels and healing masters, like you said earlier, Peyton, we kind of think like, oh, they're on that realm, so they must be like better than us or like more enlightened, and that's not always the case. We all kind of come from the same place. And when people do start to work with those energies, a lot of times they'll fully step out of, like, they'll kind of pull their energy out of their own body and let whatever energy they're working with fully step in. And when you're working with some of those energies, they vibrate at a very different frequency level. So here on Earth, our body is, our body runs at a very different frequency than all those faster energies out there in the ether. And so if you're bringing in like that full on energy being into your space, there you can see it in some of the old energy healings. People that don't know how to control and be senior in their space, they have a lot of health issues, weight issues. There's just a lot of, because the energy can be so intense, it can actually burn your physical body out if you're not, if you don't know the tools, if you don't have the education, and if you aren't fully senior in your space to like regulate, like you were saying, Peyton. That's and because even like the ascended masters are trying to help us. They don't necessarily, not all of them have had a body, so they don't understand the frequency that we have to kind of maintain here. Yeah. But sorry, Corey, I didn't mean to hop in front of you.
No, we're just it's all good. And that reminds me too, both Peyton and Yaila, what they were saying. And I remember, gosh, it was probably a couple of years ago, Peyton. I mean, we were in a class, Jesus came in to me and I mean, I've already been doing this work for several years, and he came in and he came in too close. And I mean, I felt nauseated. I thought I was going to throw up, but my body and I did have that moment of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh. And then that tool kicked in. And I got senior in my space. And I said, can you please step back a little bit? Your energy is just a little too strong, because they don't know, they don't know, and I was so grateful that I was senior in my space, and Jesus or not, I senior in my space, and I was able, I had that tool, and I said, you need to step back, please. Your energy is a little too strong. And I have a psychic medium girlfriend that actually was doing readings for me before I got on this path. And she was not senior in her space. Brilliant psychic medium. And today she had, because she was not senior in her space and was not educated on how to ground out the energies that she was taking in and reading, and she was not senior in her space. Today, she has a lot of health problems, and it's sad because she just was never taught how to be senior in her space and how to ground, and all the tools that we have talked about in previous videos and the ones that we're talking about today. And that's why we're here to talk all about energy, so that because oddly enough, a lot of people don't, and that's okay, but that's why we're here. So Peyton or Yaila, do you have any closing comments about being senior in your space?
Well, one thing that I would mention that you just triggered, Corey, was one of the tools that I know have all been trained with is setting boundaries with spirit in terms of asking questions before you agree to work with a being or let a being in your space. One of the things that I do anytime I channel is question the being. If it wants to work with me, then it has to agree to be truthful with me, to come when I ask it to come, to go when I ask it to go, to take its energy with me. And so that's another way of being senior in your space, especially if you are going to work with a being over time. like spirit guides or, ascended masters that you're particularly fond of, and just get on the same page with whatever being you're working with, and make sure they're willing to respect your terms. And that's another way to just, it's like boundaries or office hours, so that they are respecting, the rules that you're laying down. And because the being will tell you whether they agree to that or not. And if they don't, they're telling you they're not going to play by your rules. And then you can say, thank you, I'm not choosing to work with you today. It's really important, especially for people like mediums, especially who need to have very strong boundaries. Because I've heard so many of my medium friends talk about, like Corey said, you become a magnet to spirit. Spirit knows you can see it in a way that most people can't, and they all want to talk to you. And so if you don't have good boundaries, that can become a nuisance. So all the more reason to be senior.
Yep. And that reminds me, just quickly, sorry, Yaila, but that reminds me too, like when oftentimes I have clients, friends, family, they know that a spirit is waking them up in the middle of the night. And, what do I do? They woke me up and I didn't want to get up yet. And, yes, there are times where, yes, spirit wakes you up and there is a purpose for it. But when you're senior in your space, like Peyton was saying, you can ask about that. But oftentimes when you start this journey, they don't know. They don't know it's nighttime. They don't know. Actually, nighttime, it's really fun because that's your dream state. That's when you're most open. But being able to be senior in your space, I never thought that I could say when I was woken up in the middle of the night, no, I'm sleeping now. If you want to talk to me, I'll be up in, 3-4 hours and you can talk to me then. That never occurred to me. But being senior in my space and being taught how to be senior, yes, we get to choose. When the energy comes in, goes out, and if they'll agree, if they agree to what we are willing to, have them in our space or not, right?
Yeah.
So Yaila.
It's just like, I like to think of, you have a house, you have an apartment, your car, you have like terms and conditions to be able to have that in your life, or certain parameters. Your body is your home, and so you get to have terms and conditions as far as what you want inside and outside of your body. And that's even with relationships. So when you're senior in your space, this tool isn't just for people doing higher levels of energy. This is for everybody. I wish I could teach some of these basic tools to every single person in the world, because I feel like we would operate in on such a different, more respectful level, just understanding our energy, other people's energy, and how to really just be seen in our spaces. And you get to call the shots. The final thing I would say is what you're seeing, feeling, hearing, knowing, just whatever kind of energy you're sensing, you get to decide, is it yours or somebody else's? And do you want it or not want it? And when you get really clear on those things, you get to call the shots on what gets to be in your space and not in your space.
Yeah, that's great. Please remember to like and subscribe. And we'd love to have your comments and ask us questions, because we'd love to answer any questions that you have for us. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.
Bye.